China, home to innovation, the future, COVID and dodgy technology companies that steal your data. But if you scroll a little deeper on Google Earth, you'll find the special administrative region of Macau, a city which some people describe as their ancient Monaco. What's so special about Macau, you may ask? Well, apart from this building containing fragments of Sophia Flörsch's spine, Macau is home to the Macau Grand Prix, one of two races outside of Formula 1 which are classed as Grand Prix, with the other one being the New Zealand Grand Prix. This race is legendary, with drivers from all categories coming from all over the world to compete in it, and winning in it is something special, with drivers such as Dan Ticktum, Michael Schumacher, David Coulthard, Takuma Sato, and Ayrton Senna having won the race before. However, if you look into this race a little further, the amount of clips of crashes you'll find is longer than Sean Gallil's F2 career. So why is the Macau Grand Prix so dangerous? Okay, so let's start with the history up until now. The first ever Macau Grand Prix was in 1954, as what was described as a treasure hunt around the streets of the city. The drivers were racing sports cars, but shortly after, it was suggested that this hunt's track could host a professional racing event in the future, if you class a 7-metre wide track as racing. Production cars became used in 1957 for the race, although it was in 1961 when the race became open to open-wheeler cars, the Formula Libre category. The race continued as a non-professional race until 1966, when Belgian driver MAURO BIANCHI entered the race in an Alpine A220. He was racing this car for Alpine themselves, with Alpine Renault sending their engineers to assist Bianchi with technical aspects of the car. Bianchi's victory this year led to a lot more professional racing teams entering the Grand Prix for the following years. In 1967, the motorcycle race was introduced, and in that year the first fatal tragedy struck the race when double Macau Grand Prix champion Arsenio Laurel was killed when he lost control of his bike. This raised the alarm for more safety improvements for the race, since 1950s safety around the streets of Macau at over 100 miles an hour didn't seem so clever anymore. So it was made a lot safer for the future. Asian businessman Teddy Yip made it his mission to get the Macau Grand Prix known to the world back in the 70s and 80s. And he was successful, leading this Grand Prix to be one of the most famous motor racing events ever. He also started a new trend of hosting a Macau Grand Prix party at his house for the drivers, which became quite a big thing in Macau. The cars moved from Formula Libre to the Formula Pacific category in 1974, but that only lasted until 1982, when they moved to the Formula 3 category, which is where it stands today. Initially they wanted to run Formula 2 cars around the track, but they'd have to make huge circuit modifications since they physically couldn't fit on the track, which overall wasn't worth tearing apart the city to let some slightly faster cars race there. So here it became the FIA F3 World Cup. This decision has seen the reputation of the event in the motorsport world increase rapidly, with the best young drivers from all over the world coming to what was at the time a Portuguese territory, before it became Chinese in 1999. The first ever F3 Macau race was won by a young Ayrton Senna, and since then it has been won by the likes of Michael Schumacher, David Coulthard, Takuma Sato, Ralf Schumacher, Antonio Felix da Costa, twice, and Dan Ticktum, also twice. A noticeable race here was in 1990, as Michael Schumacher and Mika Hakkinen were involved in an incident, a traditional part of Macau races, where they were in first and second going into the final lap. They were on the main straight, and Hakkinen hit the back of Schumacher trying to overtake him, which ended up in old Mika retiring from the race. Schumacher had significant rear wing damage from this, but he ended up still managing to continue, and he won. Since the introduction of F3 races here, the Macau Grand Prix has gradually become a stepping stone for many F3 drivers to higher class motor racing competitions, such as Formula 2 and Formula 1, with a victory at a track narrower than my sense of humour looking quite good on your CV. In 2007, a GT3 race was introduced at Macau, which quite frankly was an interesting idea, meaning that as of 2021, over the 4-day weekend in Macau, there's a GT3 race, a Formula 3 race, a touring car race, and a motorbike race. Although each race is actually 2 races here, being a qualification race which will set the grid for the final race on Sunday. But now we're through that, let's take you through the track. The 6.1km gear circuit is one of the most challenging circuits in the world, with there's some corners with entry speeds of as little as 12 miles an hour. It's full of straights, high-speed corners, and very technical sections, and it can be very difficult to overtake, especially in the GT races. You can see how much dedication it takes to get this track right, and if you get it wrong, you certainly pay the price. Since it didn't get that much publicity, I'm going to do a quick review of the 2020 Macau Grand Prix. You may have not really heard of it, or may have presumed it was cancelled, and that's right, because I didn't really hear about it either. The reason for that is of course the acute respiratory disease which is spread around the world faster than #WeSayNoToMazepin, which has meant that the Chinese travel restrictions meant international championships couldn't come to Macau this year. But the race still happened. It instead hosted the finale of the Chinese Formula 4 Championship, when 2019 competitor and local boy Hon Shou Leong took victory in the Miguel F4 cars, beating out fellow Macanese driver Wing Cheng Chang to the line. In its long history, there have been hundreds of crashes here, with there being 16 fatal incidents since 1967, most recently being motorbike rider Daniel Hegarty in 2017. Although most of these deaths were back in the day of very little safety, to be fair. So now with better safety, there are basically no deaths here, luckily, although this track still has a lot of crashes. In the 2019 F3 races, there were 9 retirements overall, and there have been many more incidents due to the fact that half of this track is only 7 meters wide. Yes, that's about as wide as half of the NASCAR grid last year, and that street circuits generally aren't great for racing. There are some parts of this track where you're literally not allowed to overtake just because it's that narrow. If you watch a Macau race, often the only entertaining parts are the crashes, but hey, maybe I'm missing something. This makes this track so dangerous since it's narrow, long, narrow, but it can make for some great racing when there's less space than an indoor karting circuit. The point where I think Macau was really summed up has been the GT races in the past few years, where we've had pile-ups of practically the whole grid, where they have to red flag the session just to unstick each other, and they then green flag the race, and the exact same thing happens again. So although it's a legendary race, it is dangerous, and I don't ever see Formula 1 coming here, or anything like that. So there we have it, a brief history of the Macau Grand Prix, one of the biggest races of the year, and the bane of Sophia Flörsch's 450,000 Instagram followers. If you enjoyed, make sure to like and subscribe, and follow me on my social medias. Nothing I've said in this video should offend anybody, it's just jokes and made for entertainment purposes. But with that, have a nice day, and I'll see you later.